You ever notice how nothing starts an argument quite like food? And specifically, telling someone you don't eat meat. It's weird, right? It's not just a dietary choice anymore. For some people, it's like a declaration of war. So today, we're going to dive into the psychology of why veganism can spark these incredibly intense, emotional, and sometimes just downright hostile reactions. And I mean, it can get really extreme. Get this. There's a story from Psychology Today about a woman who put a few pro-vegan bumper stickers on her car. You know, simple stuff like friends, not food. But the reaction she got? Whoa. It wasn't just people disagreeing, it was aggression. People yelling at her, trying to run her off the road, and, I'm not making this up, throwing actual meat at her car. That's not normal disagreement about lunch. So that's the big question, isn't it? Why? Why does somebody else's personal choice to eat plants feel like a direct personal attack to some meat eaters? This clearly isn't about taste or nutrition. According to researchers, the real answer is buried deep inside our own psychology. To really get it, we have to look past the food on the plate and talk about this powerful but kind of invisible belief system. And researchers actually have a name for it: Carnism. So, what the heck is Carnism? Well, the term was coined by psychologist Dr. Melanie Joy, and it's basically the ideology that conditions us to eat certain animals. It's the opposite of veganism. But the most important word here is invisible. It's a belief system that's so dominant, so widespread, that we don't even see it as a choice. It's just the default setting for most of society. And this is Carnism in a nutshell, right here. In most Western cultures, we look at a dog and see a companion, a friend, a family member. But we look at a cow, an animal that's just as capable of feeling things, and we see food. Carnism is that invisible programming that tells us one is a friend and the other is a meal, and we usually go along with it without ever asking why. So here's the crucial part. For most people, eating meat isn't just something they do. It's part of an ideology that they don't even know they have. It's the status quo. And like any dominant belief system, well, it really doesn't like to be challenged. And that's where all the trouble starts. Okay, so what happens when someone comes along and challenges that invisible default? It's not just seen as a difference of opinion. For some people, it feels like a direct threat, not just to their dinner, but to their identity, their traditions, their whole way of life. This brings us to a really cool idea from social psychology called symbolic threat. The theory basically says that groups of people don't just get hostile when they're fighting over resources. A lot of the time, the conflict comes from one group feeling like their entire belief system, their values, their morals, their identity, is being called into question by another group. And this connects perfectly. The very existence of a vegan can feel like someone holding up a mirror. It forces a meat eater to see that their normal way of eating is actually a choice. And because the vegan made a different choice, it can feel like this unspoken judgment on everything from family barbecues to holiday dinners. And listen, this isn't just a vague theory. Researchers can literally measure this feeling. They ask meat eaters how much they agree with statements exactly like this one, and sure enough, the more someone agrees with a statement like this, the more they see veganism as a real symbolic threat. So, we have our theory. People who are really invested in the meat-eating norm feel threatened by vegans. But how does that defensiveness actually manifest? What does it look like? Well, researchers came up with some really clever experiments to figure it out in what I'm calling the burger and ice cream test. The hypothesis they had was pretty simple. If this is all about defending your ideology, then the people who believe most strongly in Carnism should be the most motivated to push back against the other side. And a really easy way to do that: just devalue the other group's symbols, in this case, their food. They predicted these folks would expect vegan food to taste just terrible. And the results were fascinating. Take a look. The more committed someone was to meat eating, the worse they expected a vegan burger to taste. I mean, look how steeply that line drops. But for people who were less attached to meat eating, they didn't really see a big difference in expected taste. It's almost a perfect correlation. The more invested you are in Carnism, the more you're convinced that vegan burger is going to be awful. Now, just to be sure this wasn't some weird burger-specific thing, they did the test again with ice cream. And guess what? The exact same pattern. The more someone identified with meat eating, the more they were sure that vegan ice cream would taste bad. It's a remarkably consistent psychological effect. Okay, so we've got a really clear link, a correlation. But does feeling threatened actually cause this reaction? That's the big question. To figure that out, the researchers had to take it one step further. They had to see if they could actually trigger this effect on purpose. And how they did it was pretty genius. They took a group of meat eaters right before Thanksgiving, the ultimate turkey-centric holiday, and they primed them by asking questions about how veganism might threaten their holiday traditions. They basically made that symbolic threat feel very real and immediate. Then they asked the group to rate the expected taste of vegan food. The result was crystal clear. The group that was reminded of the threat expected the vegan food to taste significantly worse than a control group. This shows a direct causal link. Feeling threatened literally makes you think the food will be bad. But this whole psychological defense mechanism, it's not just about predicting bad taste. That's really just the tip of the iceberg. This is a window into much broader, much deeper social prejudices. It turns out this is almost never just about the food. When you look at the wider research, it gets pretty wild. The level of bias against vegans is shockingly high. Some studies found it's on par with the prejudice expressed toward immigrants. In one study, the only group that was rated more negatively were drug addicts. The bias is often strongest against vegan men, probably because meat eating is so tied up with traditional ideas of masculinity. It's also most intense for vegans who are motivated by animal rights because, well, that's the most direct moral challenge. And politically, anti-vegan sentiment tends to be strongly linked with right-wing ideologies, where meat often acts as a symbol of tradition and human dominance over nature. So, what's the big takeaway here? The next time you see a heated argument about food, or find yourself in one, just remember it's probably not about the food at all. It's about culture, tradition, and identity being challenged. Which leaves us with a really tricky final question. When our very identity is on the menu, how do we even begin to talk about what we eat?